and even beings coming out of the spirals and or going into the spirals. Now, it doesn't take too much of a leap to say, hey, maybe they saw something like we're seeing today. Could these ancient people have seen spirals and phenomenon in the sky, much like we've been seeing lately? And then they carved it into a rock for future generations to see and understand?
In the oral tradition of many tribes, I have yet to come across a tribal member from a tribe that does not have stories of giants roaming the land. And the way, as my father told me, and as it was told to him by his father, my grandfather, and passed down, the star people came from the Seven Sisters. The Seven Sisters being what we call the constellation of the Pleiades. The Seven Sisters and also the Warrior's Belt, which we know today as Orion. So from the belt of Orion, from that belt and from the Seven Sisters is where these star people came from. And the star people would come, they made themselves out to be gods because they had power, they had big medicine, like our people say. They were able to do great feats that the people were just astonished by. And so they took them to be gods because that's what they presented themselves to be. In that manner is how they then went and took the women from the different tribes. And from there is where the giant tribes were birthed from. The women did not survive the births of these giant beings. But as these giants continue to procreate and continue to spread across the land, there's many stories of the people and the tribes fighting against them. Sometimes, with good results, sometimes with bad results. Until eventually there was a culmination of the flood that came and destroyed the giants off the land. We still have some stories of giants after the flood. Ishtipapa, which was a giant that lived in Georgia among the Muskogee Creek. Ishtipapa means man-eaters, because these giant beings would just come and take a regular-sized human being and just pick them up and just bite their head off and just drink the blood. Like popping the cap on a bottle. Boom, 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 boom. So they received the name Ishtipapa, man-eater. The origin of them is not something that I know of that our oral tradition goes into. Like who created them? How did they begin? We don't have that. All we know is where they came from, and what constellations they came from to our people. And the giant races, they varied in height. They were the ones who built a lot of these ancient mound structures. We simply didn't have the technology to do it. Did regular-sized human beings have the time to do it? Yes. And there are copies of mounds that have been made. Just like there's the 3 pyramids in Egypt, 2 of those pyramids are copies of the oldest one. But they could not quite match the engineering, the architecture, the ley lines, they couldn't do it. So yes, there are mounds that native people have built, but they're a far cry from these gigantic mound structures that the giants built. It is good to mention that the stars, the constellations, the astronomy of the ley lines of the constellations, that's something that was taught to us by the star people. It was knowledge that was given to our ancient ancestors. And the belief was that there were certain times during certain seasons where there were portals that would open up into the spirit world. And markedly the equinoxes were the main times when this would take place. Edokmogi, Georgia, in Macon, Georgia, modern-day Macon, Georgia, there's the remains of an earth lodge that is perfectly aligned for the summer equinoxes and the spring equinoxes. And so it was believed that when the people would gather there during those times, that those portals would open, those doorways would open, and it would open the lines of communication and also for these spirit beings to come through, and whether it was teach, trade, or even take people with them they would do that. And markedly, the equinoxes were the main times when this would take place. And so it was believed that when the people would gather there during those times, that those portals would open, those doorways would open, and it would open the lines of communication and also for these spirit beings to come through, and whether it was teach, trade, or even take people with them, they would do that.